So, what do you think of my fine tower here? It's quite the jewel of the Wasteland, isn't it? I dare say I'm quite proud of it myself.
Allistair Tenpenny is best remembered as the man who destroyed Megaton, the rich, cruel old man who sits atop his tower, looking down over the Wasteland like it's his personal shooting gallery. But there's more to him than just that, and probably not in the way that you're thinking. Because Tenpenny isn't a typical villain, driven by hatred or ideology. He doesn't want people dead out of malice, and his prejudice against ghouls is more surface level than most players realize. No, Tenpenny's real sin is simpler, and somehow much worse. He simply does whatever he wants in the pursuit of his own pleasure, and his power speaks for him. He doesn't need strong opinions, he doesn't need convictions. He just needs capital, influence, and people willing to do what he says. This is a deep dive into the mind of Allistair Tenpenny. Little is known about Tenpenny's backstory, but he does present himself as an old-world aristocrat, the key word here being presents. His accent isn't really an expression of who he is, but it's a method of control. In the Wasteland, sounding educated is often enough to be seen as better than most, a form of social armor and a way to command respect without ever having earned it. Emil Pagliarulo, the lead designer and writer for Fallout 3, explicitly states that Tenpenny's accent is purely performative. He calls himself a gentleman, but avoids discussing his past, deflecting questions with charm or irritation.
Oh, it's impolite for a gentleman to talk about himself, but I'd hope this magnificent tower would speak volumes.
And while he is British and did leave Britain seeking fortune, at some point along the way he adopted this persona. My guess, it's kind of a fake-it-till-you-make-it strategy, a more calculated performance designed to elevate him above the rest of the filth and chaos of the Wasteland. But it did work. By the early to mid-2200s, Tenpenny crosses the Atlantic and ends up in the capital Wasteland in search of wealth, and he finds it by ruthless pragmatism. The core of his business model was slavery. May Wong, an escaped slave in Rivet City, explicitly states that she was once owned by Tenpenny himself at the tower. And while information we do have in-game is limited, this alone tells you everything you need to know about him. But slavery wasn't his only venture. He also ran mercenary contracts, both protection and scavenging operations, high-risk recovery missions, such as the disastrous expedition to Fort Constantine, and likely general trade, exploiting the capital Wasteland's instability and constant demand for armed force. The capital Wasteland, with its active slave trade and perpetual violence, would have been uniquely suited to someone with Tenpenny's ambitions. The game alludes more to Tenpenny adapting to the Wasteland, rather than the other way around. A story of a young man leaving home in search of fortune, no matter what it costs, seems far more likely than him stumbling into wealth by accident. Tenpenny was ready to seize power by any means necessary. Sometime around the 2250s, Tenpenny funded an expedition to recover power armor from Fort Constantine. He hired a crew of mercenaries for the job, but the mission was a complete failure. Nearly half of the team were wiped out, and the power armor was never retrieved. Tenpenny paid little attention to the dead mercs, and even less to Crowley, one of the hired mercenaries the player can encounter in the game, on account of him turning into a ghoul. But his reaction wasn't anger or frustration, it was merely indifference. To Tenpenny, people are just tools. When something breaks, you write it off and buy a replacement. It's simply the nature of doing business. This transactional worldview also explains how he's so easily able to deal in slave trade. Human life has no inherent value to him, they simply serve a function. Shortly after the incident at Fort Constantine, Tenpenny meets Mister Burke, and this would become the most important relationship in Tenpenny's life. Burke established himself as Tenpenny's right-hand man, handling intimidation, logistics, planning, and anything that requires intent or major involvement. Where Tenpenny is passive and detached, Burke is active and deliberate. To further contrast these two, Tenpenny does evil things, but disassociates the act from the people he's doing it to. He doesn't enjoy suffering, but is simply unaffected. But Burke, on the other hand, is actively more sinister and psychotic. He explicitly derives satisfaction from the work itself, a trait clearly demonstrated in his enthusiastic plot to destroy Megaton.
What you did, it was a great thing. That place, those people, necessary sacrifices. Here's to a better future. Here's to Tenpenny Tower.
And it's together that they form this perfect symbiotic relationship. Tenpenny provides the capital and vision in the palatable form of a respectable gentleman, and Burke operates in the shadows as his willing instrument, the enforcer who makes the ugly decisions so that Tenpenny doesn't have to. At this point, their collaboration focuses on restoring Tenpenny Tower to its former glory and acquiring the right kind of wealthy tenants to populate it. Because above all else, to Tenpenny, the tower is a statement, a monument to the idea that even after the world ends, class still matters. During the time that Fallout 3 takes place, Tenpenny Tower is fully operational. The building has been completely refurbished, and residents have been carefully selected to move in. It's important to Tenpenny that his bourgeois personality is not only reflected in the building, but in the people it houses as well. And that's why everyone at Tenpenny Tower is so stuck up, so performatively refined. They were selected as an aesthetic of aristocracy. Try saying that 5 times fast. Yet I'd argue that Tenpenny's objectification of people is shown most clearly in his attitude toward ghouls. He's often described as anti-ghoul. That's only partially true. Don't get me wrong, he's still ghoul-phobic. Is that even a word? And uses dehumanizing language freely. But his prejudice is very surface level. It's more of a distaste than a deep hatred. He isn't physically opposed to letting ghouls in, the way the Brotherhood of Steel might be. But again, his only condition is transaction. To him, they're just another type of potential tenant or asset. If they can pay rent and follow the rules, he simply doesn't care. And even if residents object, he'll simply displace them without hesitation. Order and profit comes first. Everything else is negotiable. In fact, he even looks forward to hunting ghouls if they cause trouble, shown in his famous Wasteland safari, which further emphasizes the fact he's a classist first, and the hatred is secondary. Ghouls aren't inferior because they're ghouls. They're inferior because they're poor. If a ghoul shows up with caps and manners, Tenpenny is more than willing to rent to them. And if a human shows up broke and desperate, he won't. By 2277, Tenpenny is a recluse in his penthouse. When he does rarely leave the suite, most of the time he doesn't even bother getting dressed, spending most of his days on his Wasteland safaris, drinking heavily, even stating that he hasn't been dry in years. He maintains a strict daily diet of iguana bit sandwich with no salt and a pear, much to the annoyance of his cook. At this point, Mr. Burke has the real power behind the tower's operations, with Tenpenny acting much more as a figurehead that Burke manipulates to his own ends. In fact, Burke being the one who actually wants to destroy Megaton. He manipulates Tenpenny by playing on his casual, offhanded comment about the town being an eyesore, and Burke takes that single remark and spins it into a full-scale conspiracy, framing Megaton's destruction as simply natural selection. Initially, Tenpenny even suggested to evacuate the town before destroying it.
Besides, Burke assured me that bomb was quite unstable. I asked Burke to suggest they vacate.
But when that doesn't happen, when hundreds of people die in an instant, Tenpenny remains utterly indifferent.
Oh no, I'm certainly rather sore about all of that, but certain sacrifices must be made.
This is the essence of Tenpenny's evilness. It's not active malice, it's passivity. It's the willingness to let atrocities happen. It's the willingness to let atrocities happen because they're convenient, or because someone else suggested it, or because he simply doesn't care enough to stop them. Burke is the architect for Megaton's destruction, but Tenpenny is complicit. He signs off on it, he's the one who funds it, and when it's all said and done, he toasts to the future from his balcony, drink in hand as if nothing had ever happened, because to him, nothing did. Tenpenny's penthouse barely feels lived in. It acts more as a throne room than a home. It's a space designed to project power and status, but it's empty. No evidence that anyone actually lived a life worth living there. It's a monument to a man who has everything, but feels nothing. And no matter how Tenpenny dies in the game, whether he's assassinated by Mr. Crowley, overthrown by Roy Phillips and his ghouls, or as he wastes away with Mr. Burke taking control, there's no grand reckoning. Because Fallout isn't saying that the apocalypse creates monsters, it's saying that it doesn't get rid of them. Tenpenny represents capitalism surviving the end of the world untouched, old hierarchies intact, and power still left unchecked. The bombs didn't erase class, they just gave the survivors a new stage to perform the same old roles. Tenpenny didn't need an apocalypse to become who he is, and I think that's what makes him such a devastating villain. Not because he's evil in some grand theatrical way, but because his evil is so recognizable in our modern day. And I think that he's proof that you don't need a new world to build a better one, but you simply need to stop letting men like him run it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you agree with me, disagree with me, have a different opinion, or if you just think I'm an idiot. But anyway, make sure to like, subscribe, and yeah, thank you for watching.